I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, heart pounding like a war drum. The room was dark, but the terror from the nightmare still clung to me like a second skin. I could hear my own labored breathing, and the silence of the night only amplified the frantic beat of my heart. The clock on the bedside table read 3:33 a.m. Again, it was always the same time. I forced myself to sit up, my body trembling. The room felt colder than usual, an unnatural chill that seeped into my bones. The nightmare had been more vivid this time, more real. I could still feel the weight of the shadowy figure's presence, still hear its whispers, a language that seemed ancient and malevolent. But this time, something was different. This time, the figure had spoken my name. Started 3 months ago, on an otherwise ordinary night. I had been living alone in my modest apartment in the city, trying to navigate the usual stresses of life. Work was hectic, my social life was a mess, and sleep was my only refuge. But that night, refuge turned into torment. I dreamed of a house. It was always the same house, an old Victorian mansion that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. The paint was peeling, the windows were boarded up, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. Yet, despite its dilapidated state, it exuded a strange allure, drawing me in. In the dream, I was always outside the house, staring at it. The sky above was perpetually overcast, casting everything in a gray, foreboding light. As I approached the house, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, like I was stepping into the maw of some great beast. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. The floorboards creaked under my feet, and every step echoed through the empty halls. There was a staircase leading up to the second floor, and I always found myself climbing it, despite the fear gnawing at my insides. At the top of the stairs was a long corridor with several doors on either side. I would walk down this corridor, each door exuding a sense of menace. I knew something terrible lay behind each one, but I never stopped to find out. I always headed for the last door on the right. Beyond that door was a room. In the center of the room stood a figure, shrouded in shadows. I could never make out its features, but I could feel its eyes on me, cold and piercing. It never moved, never spoke, but its presence was suffocating. I would stand there, frozen with fear, until I woke up. The dream was the same every night, and every night it left me more exhausted than the last. I tried everything to get rid of it. Sleeping pills, therapy, meditation, but nothing worked. It was as if the dream had latched onto my very soul, refusing to let go. Then, about a month ago, the dream started to change. The first change was subtle. I began hearing whispers in the dream, faint and indistinct, as if someone, or something, was trying to communicate with me. The language was unfamiliar, but it filled me with a deep, primal fear. I could feel the words crawling under my skin, burrowing into my mind. The second change was more disturbing. One night, as I stood in the room with the shadowy figure, it moved. Just a slight shift, but enough to make my blood run cold. I could sense its hunger, a predatory intent that made me feel like prey. I started seeing things in my waking life too, shadows moving in the corners of my vision, fleeting glimpses of the figure from my dream. I would hear the whispers when I was alone, their insidious tones blending with the background noise of the city. Sleep became something I dreaded, a nightly descent into terror. Desperate, I began researching sleep disorders and paranormal phenomena. I scoured forums and read countless articles, hoping to find someone who had experienced something similar. That's when I stumbled upon a post from a woman named Sarah. Sarah described a dream eerily similar to mine. A Victorian house, a shadowy figure, the same overwhelming dread. She claimed the dream had plagued her for months, driving her to the brink of insanity. She had eventually found a way to confront the figure, to demand answers. Her post ended abruptly, but not before she mentioned a name: Dr. Richard Graves. Dr. Graves was a renowned psychologist with a focus on sleep disorders and the paranormal. According to his website, he had helped countless patients deal with recurring nightmares and other supernatural experiences. I decided to reach out to him, hoping he could offer some insight into my torment. When I met Dr. Graves, I was struck by his calm demeanor and piercing blue eyes. He listened intently as I described my dream, taking notes and nodding occasionally. When I mentioned the changes in the dream and the whispers, his expression grew serious. "You're not the first person to come to me with a story like this," he said. "I've encountered several cases of what I call ominous dreams. These dreams are more than just nightmares. They seem to be a bridge between our world and something else." "Something else?" I asked, my voice trembling. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I believe these dreams are a form of contact. The entities within them are trying to reach out, to communicate, but their intentions are rarely benign." Dr. Graves suggested a method to confront the figure in my dream, similar to what Sarah had done. He called it lucid confrontation. The idea was to become aware that I was dreaming while in the dream, and then to face the figure, demanding answers. It took weeks of practice, but I finally managed to achieve lucidity in the dream. The realization that I was dreaming filled me with a strange mix of fear and empowerment. As I climbed the stairs and walked down the corridor, I kept reminding myself that I was in control. When I entered the room, the shadowy figure was waiting, as always. But this time, I didn't freeze. I took a deep breath and spoke, my voice echoing in the silence. "Who are you? What do you want?" The whispers grew louder, more coherent. I could almost understand the words. The figure seemed to shift, the shadows peeling away to reveal a gaunt, pale face with hollow eyes. It opened its mouth, and a voice like rustling leaves filled the room. "I am the keeper of secrets, the harbinger of nightmares. You have been chosen." "Chosen for what?" I demanded, my fear giving way to anger. "To witness, to understand, to join us." The room began to warp and twist, the walls closing in. The figure's eyes bored into mine, and I felt a pull, like I was being drawn into the darkness. I struggled to wake up, but something held me in place. "You cannot escape," the keeper whispered. "You belong to us now." I woke up screaming, my body drenched in sweat. The room was cold, and the clock read 3:33 a.m. My heart raced, and I could still hear the keeper's voice echoing in my mind. Over the next few days, the line between dream and reality began to blur. I would see the Victorian house on my way to work, its silhouette looming on the horizon. The whispers followed me everywhere, growing louder and more insistent. I started losing chunks of time, waking up in strange places with no memory of how I got there. Dr. Graves grew increasingly concerned. He suggested more intense therapy sessions and even considered involving a paranormal investigator. But deep down, I knew it was too late. The keeper had marked me, and there was no escaping its grasp. One night, as I lay in bed, too afraid to sleep, I heard a knock on my door. It was slow and deliberate, each rap sending a shiver down my spine. I got up, my body moving on its own accord, and opened the door. Standing there was Sarah. She looked pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow and empty. She reached out and touched my hand, her skin ice cold. "They're coming for you," she whispered, her voice a ghostly echo. "You can't fight them." Before I could respond, she disappeared, leaving me alone in the dark hallway. I stumbled back to my room, my mind reeling. The whispers were louder now, a cacophony of voices filling my head. I knew I couldn't stay in the apartment any longer. I grabbed my keys and fled, driving aimlessly through the city. The streets were eerily empty, and the Victorian house seemed to appear around every corner, its dark windows watching me. Eventually, I found myself at the edge of the city, near a dense forest. I parked the car and got out, drawn to the trees by some invisible force. As I wandered deeper into the forest, the whispers grew louder, guiding me to a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood the Victorian house, impossibly out of place. The front door was open, inviting me in. I knew I had no choice. This was my final confrontation. Inside, the house was exactly as it had been in my dreams. I climbed the stairs, walked down the corridor, and entered the room. The keeper was waiting, its hollow eyes gleaming in the darkness. "You have come," it said, its voice a chorus of whispers. I want answers, I demanded, my voice trembling. The keeper smiled, a grotesque contortion of its face. You already know the answers. You have always known. As it spoke, memories flooded back. Memories of a past life, of choices made and paths taken. I saw myself standing before the keeper, making a pact, agreeing to serve as a bridge between worlds. You are one of us, the keeper whispered. You belong to the night. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. I was not a victim, but a participant in this dark ritual. I had willingly entered into this nightmare, and there was no escape. The shadows closed in around me, and I felt myself merging with the darkness, becoming one with the whispers. My last conscious thought was of the clock, forever frozen at 3:33 a.m. And then, there was only the night.